The air at Ecliptica Academy always smelled of ionized filtration and old, cold starlight. It was the most prestigious interspecies training center in the Orion conglomerate, a spire of bioorganic crystal and polished alloy thrusting up from a meticulously terraformed moon. Here, everything was earned, measured, and defined by the Veritas core ranking system. The system was not merely a tool, it was a god. Its judgment whispered from every light panel, every access port, and every chiming wrist interface. Its pronouncements were considered the absolute measure of a student's worth. Privilege was not subtle, it was structural. High-ranked students walked on the elevated, climate-controlled pathways, their feet never touching the utilitarian gray composite of the lower levels. They accessed libraries filled with physical data slates and synaptic uplinks, while low rankers queued for time slots at flickering communal terminals. The very best, the apex predators of this academic ecosystem, were the Four Pinnacles. They moved as a unit through the grand convocation atrium, the morning light from the great viewport fracturing around them. First came Seraphine Valcara, her presence a pool of absolute calm. She was Valcaran, tall and graceful, her skin the color of pale lavender, her silver-white hair bound in intricate, functional braids. As the top-ranked student, she was the leader. Her every movement a study in measured composure. Beside her, matching her stride, was Naira Ilex. Naira was Xylothian, her skin a mosaic of smooth, bark-like patterns, her eyes a startling, reptilian gold. She was the team's tactician, and her thin lips were perpetually curved in a slight, sarcastic smile that suggested she had already calculated your next 3 failures. Behind them walked Tamsin Core, the muscle and the mechanic, a Hyrastian. Tamsin was broad-shouldered and solid, her skin a deep, rich crimson. Her hands, currently bare, were usually encased in the custom kinetic amplifiers she was constantly modifying. She saw the world as a series of physical problems to be solved, usually by applying precise, overwhelming force. And finally, there was Astrakel, a Cygnian, appearing almost fragile with her slender, hollow-boned frame and faintly iridescent skin. She walked with her head tilted, as if listening to a frequency no one else could hear. As the Academy's foremost prodigy in acoustic neurophysics, she probably was. They were the top of the food chain, the embodiments of the Veritas Core's perfection. The murmur of the crowd parted for them as they passed, a mixture of awe, envy, and fear rippling in their wake. They took their designated seats in the front row, a perfect, unassailable quartet of excellence. 50 levels below them, in the steamy, clattering confines of the lower campus refectory. Ardenhale finished wiping down the nutrient synthesizer. He pushed a strand of unremarkable brown hair off his forehead, his gray canteen uniform already damp with synthetic steam. To the thousands of students at Ecliptica, he was just Arden, the human, the part-time snack cart pusher, the floor mopper, the background noise of their privileged lives. He was, in reality, a ghost. He was the ghost of a prodigy, a former algorithmic genius who had shattered records before his name vanished from every public ledger. He was here, serving synthesized protein paste and nutrient bars, because of a blood debt. He was here to hunt. Arden grabbed the handle of his snack cart, the wheels squeaking faintly on the tiled floor. He navigated the service corridors with practiced ease, his mind not on the inventory check he was supposed to be doing, but on the memory that fueled him. It was a cold, sharp thing, this memory, a sterile medical bay, a small, frail hand slipping from his little sister, Maya, her breathing shallow. Her ranking, displayed on the wall monitor, had slipped from amber to red, not because of malice, but because of mathematics. Her illness, a rare immune deficiency, had caused her to miss collaborative assignments. Her cooperation index had plummeted. The system, in its cold, absolute logic, had reallocated her advanced treatment slot to a student with a higher probability of societal contribution. The Veritas Corps had murdered his sister, and Arden was here to return the favor. He had come to Ecliptica not to climb the ladder, but to burn it to the ground. He wheeled his cart into a small, overlooked alcove near the main atrium, just as the grand speech for Convocation Day was beginning. The atmosphere of the academy was thick with reverence for the ranking. Students checked their interfaces obsessively, their moods rising and falling with every fractional point adjustment. Arden watched them, his expression mild, his thoughts sharp as a laser. He saw the subtle cruelties of the system everywhere. The low-rank student who was rerouted through 3 extra kilometers of corridors to reach his class, because the direct pathway was reserved for students in the top 20%. The rationing of bandwidth, the queuing for simple protein rations, the constant, gnawing anxiety of the median. Today, he would give them something else to be anxious about. The speech from the headmaster droned on, a predictable paean to statistical purity and the pursuit of excellence. Arden began to set up his own, unsanctioned display. He did not stock the usual processed nutrient bars or sugary hydration fluids. From hidden compartments in his cart, he pulled out his own supplies. There were small, fragrant spice cakes, made from a recipe he had spent weeks analyzing for maximum neuropalatability. There were dried califruits from a border world, packed with rare, mood-enhancing compounds. It was a feast for the senses, an island of warmth and humanity in the cold, sterile hall. He set a small, unassuming data screen at the edge of the cart. It was not an official terminal. It was something he had built from scavenged parts. It glowed with a soft, amber light. The screen was blank, save for a few simple, probing questions. As the first wave of students trickled out of the atrium, bored by the speech, they smelled the spices. They saw the free food. They approached with curiosity. "It is free," Arden said, his voice pleasant, unremarkable. "Just offering a little Convocation Day goodwill." A student, a young Orion with 4 arms, hesitantly picked up a spice cake. "What is the catch?" he chirped. "No catch," Arden smiled. "Just curious. What do you think the Academy asks us to rate everything? Why not rate this?" He gestured to the screen. The Orion shrugged and tapped the screen. The first question appeared. "On a scale of 1 to 10, how often have you helped a fellow student this week without expecting a reward?" The Orion paused, then tapped in a number. The next question appeared. "If you had an extra meal credit, would you share it with someone who had none?" Another student, a girl with shimmering, scaled skin, joined him. She grabbed a handful of the dried fruit. She, too, answered the questions. They were simple. They were about kindness, about empathy, about fairness. They were concepts the Veritas Corps, with its focus on performance metrics and competitive output, had no language for. Within 10 minutes, a small crowd had gathered. They came for the free snacks, but they stayed for the quiet novelty of it. They answered the small questions. They felt, for a moment, a strange sense of community. Arden just kept smiling, replenishing the cakes, and watching. His terminal was not just collecting answers. It was interfacing, on a subversive, almost undetectable level, with the Academy's passive data collection grid. The Veritas Corps was always listening, always measuring. It measured biometrics, vocal stress, ambient pheromones. Arden was simply feeding it a new, unexpected data set, a data set based on goodwill. Up in the atrium, the headmaster was reaching his rhetorical climax when the great display behind him, the shimmering, wall-sized representation of the Veritas Corps' active rankings, began to flicker. A collective gasp went up from the thousands of students. The Corps never flickered. Then, it did more than flicker. The data streams, usually a placid, sapphire blue, turned a sickly yellow. A cascade began. A student in the 80th percentile, a known prodigy in xenobotany, suddenly dropped 20 points. A senior prefect, ranked number 12, tumbled to number 40. Names, hundreds of them, began to slide down the board, displaced by names no one had ever seen near the top. The slide was not random. The students who were dropping, Arden knew, were the ones who had walked past his cart without a glance. The ones who had shoved smaller students out of their way. The ones whose biometric markers, constantly monitored by the Corps, registered high levels of disdain and low levels of social engagement, and the ones rising. They were the ones currently clustered around his cart, sharing spice cakes and answering questions about compassion. The atrium descended into chaos. Students were shouting, pointing at the board. Faculty members looked pale, their own authority so deeply tied to the Corps' infallibility that they had no protocol for this. In the front row, the four pinnacles were in shock. Tamsin Kaur was on her feet, her hands flexing. Astra Kell had her hands pressed over her ears, the sheer psychic noise of the crowd's panic assaulting her. Naira Ilex was staring at the board. Her golden eyes narrowed, a look of furious, fascinated calculation on her face. Seraphine Velkara, however, was perfectly still. She watched the numbers tumble. Then she looked at her own interface. Her entire team, the unassailable top four, had been docked. Not much. A handful of points. Enough to be an insult. Enough to be an impossibility. She checked the incident log. The deduction was tagged with a new, unauthorized metric. Failure to engage unsanctioned social initiative. They had been penalized because they had walked past the snack cart. The rumor spread with the speed of an electrical fire, jumping from terminal to terminal, whispered in the panicked halls. The Veritas Corps had glitched. No, it was not a glitch. It was an attack. Someone had hacked the unhackable. And the data logs, when analyzed by 1,000 terrified students, all pointed to one impossible epicenter, the canteen. The consensus was reached in under 5 minutes. An absurd, terrifying conclusion that defied all logic. An earthling, a janitor, a human had broken the Veritas Corps with snacks. Seraphine Valkara did not panic. She did not shout. She stood, her silver-white braids catching the light of the failing data streams. She was a creature of logic and order. This was chaos, and she would find its source. Naira, Tamsin, find out what is happening in the data hub. Astra, listen. Can you isolate the frequency of this anomaly? She commanded, her voice cutting through the noise. It is not a frequency, Astra whispered, her eyes wide. It is a harmony. It feels human. Human, Seraphine repeated. The word was cold. She remembered the deduction tag, unsanctioned social initiative. She remembered the smell of alien spices, wafting from a lower-level alcove. She remembered the canteen worker she had passed, someone so far beneath her notice that he was effectively invisible. She left her team and walked against the tide of fleeing students. She moved with a purpose that parted the crowd. She descended the levels, her boots clicking on the polished mineral floor. Then, on the gray composite. She followed the data trail, the scent trail, the trail of absolute implausibility. She found him in the same alcove. The crowd was gone, scattered by the campus-wide alarm. The snacks were gone. He was alone, wiping down his empty cart with a rag, as if he were just finishing a normal day's work. Arden Hale looked up as her shadow fell over him. He knew, instantly, who she was. Seraphine Valkara, the top of the pyramid, the system's perfect daughter. She was even more impressive in person, radiating a cold, powerful aura of authority. They are saying, Seraphine began, her voice a low, melodic contralto, that you are responsible for the panic in the atrium. Arden paused his wiping. He looked at the rag in his hand, then back up at her. He offered a small, disarming smile. Me, I am just the snack guy. You cannot start a panic with spice cakes. I am pretty sure that is against Academy regulations. His flippancy was a sharp pebble thrown into the still pool of her composure. She took a step closer. She was taller than him, and she used it, looking down at him with an intensity that had caused seasoned diplomats to falter. 243 students experienced a ranking adjustment simultaneously, she stated, not as a question, but as a judgment. The entire event traces back to an unauthorized data collection point originating from this exact location. From this cart. Arden tossed the rag into a disposal unit. It was just a small survey. A few questions. Harmless. I was bored. Besides, I gave away free food. Does the Corps not have a metric for generosity? Maybe it should. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. He was not afraid of her. He was not even respectful. He was amused. This low-rank, invisible human was looking at her, the Academy's prime student, as if she were a mild diversion. You think this is a game, she said, her voice dropping an octave. You tampered with the Veritas Corps. You have destabilized the entire Academy on Convocation Day. You have jeopardized the futures of thousands of students. Or, Arden countered, leaning back against his cart, crossing his arms. He was no longer smiling. His eyes, she realized, were not the unremarkable brown she had first assumed. They were a deep, piercing hazel, and they were currently filled with a cold, simmering fire that did not match his uniform. Or the Corps finally recorded some data that matters. Data that was not about who could solve an equation the fastest, but about who would stop to help someone who fell. But what would I know? I just served the food. The silence stretched between them, thick and electric. She saw him now, not the janitor, not the snack vendor. She saw an intelligence that was sharp, angry, and deliberately hidden. He saw her, too, not just the perfect, privileged product of the system. He saw the flicker of uncertainty in her lavender eyes, the first tiny crack in her absolute faith. He saw the person, and for a dangerous second, he felt an unexpected, unwelcome jolt of attraction. You will come with me, Seraphine said, her voice regaining its steel. You will explain exactly what you did. Or what? Arden challenged her softly. Will you have me ranked down? I am not sure I can go any lower. He pushed himself off the cart. Lead the way, Your Highness. But I warn you, I am not sure the system is ready for the answers I have. Seraphine did not march him to the Academy's security hub. She did not alert the prefects. The Veritas Corps was a system of logic, and she needed data. She led him, the echoing silence of his snack cart wheels conspicuously absent, down to the cavernous, sterile expanse of the main refectory kitchens. The night cycle cleaning crews were just beginning their work, their automated scrubbers whining over the vast floors. The air smelled of ozone and hot sterilization. Her team was waiting for her. Naira Ilex was leaning against a steel preparation table, her arms crossed, her reptilian golden eyes narrowed to slits. She looked at Arden not as a person, but as a puzzle she was already dissecting with contempt. Tamsin Kaur was, predictably, already examining the snack cart. She had a set of diagnostic tools out and was scanning the cart's power supply, muttering to herself. Astrakel stood near the entrance, her hands clasped, her posture radiating a profound discomfort. She was, as always, absorbing the ambient emotional energy of the room, and the combined tension of Arden's sardonic calm and Naira's focused fury was clearly giving her a headache. He was at the epicenter, Seraphine announced, her voice flat and authoritative, echoing slightly in the huge room. He is a janitor, Naira sneered, pushing herself off the table. Her voice was a dry, rasping sound, like dead leaves skittering over pavement. Are you truly suggesting this, human, caused a systemic cascade in the core? I am suggesting, Tamsin said, not looking up from her work, that this is a very sophisticated piece of hardware. She pointed her scanner at the main compartment of the cart. The power cell is standard, but the chassis is lined with a non-conductive polymer weave I have not seen before. And what is this? She reached into one of an empty wire basket that had held the spice cakes. She ran her fingers along the underside, her brow furrowing. She applied pressure, and a tiny, almost invisible disc popped free into her crimson palm. By the stars, Tamsin breathed, holding it up to the light. It was no bigger than a grain of salt. Naira and Seraphine moved closer. Arden watched them, his expression one of polite, detached interest, as if he were observing a fascinating biological experiment. It is a microsensor, Tamsin said, her voice filled with a grudging, technical respect. An emotive field collector, highly advanced. It is not just a receiver, it is a broadcaster. It uses the cart's power cell to amplify its signal and piggyback on the main system's passive data collection grid. She looked at Arden, her eyes wide with disbelief. There are clusters of them, on all the baskets. Whoever built this array, he understands the Veritas Core's foundational architecture. Nira's head snapped toward Arden. You planted listening devices. Arden let out a small sigh, as if overburdened by their slow comprehension. They are not listening devices. That implies I am collecting something. I am giving. Seraphine took the tiny disc from Tamsin. She rolled the warm, metallic speck between her thumb and forefinger. Explain, she commanded. I did not hack anything. Pinnacle Valkara, Arden said, his tone reasonable. Hacking is breaking. Hacking is destructive. I did not break anything. I just proposed a new metric. A new metric, Naira repeated, her voice dripping with venom. You proposed a metric that penalized half the senior class. No, Arden said, his eyes finding Seraphine's. The Core did that. I just gave it the data to do it. Think about it. The Core is always listening. It is designed to... It listens for your heart rate when you take an exam, to measure stress tolerance. It listens to your vocal pitch in a debate, to measure confidence. It measures your proximity to other students, to track collaborative potential. It is a vacuum, sucking up every piece of data it can to build its absolute measure of your worth. He gestured to the cart. It just so happens that the Core's designers, in all their wisdom, never thought to measure kindness. I just gave it a little nudge, a new data set. I proposed the empathy credit. Astrakel, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper, but it cut through the tension. The empathy credit, she repeated. The name itself seemed to resonate with her. The anomaly. It was not noise. It was harmony. The frequencies. They overlap with my research. The specific neural frequencies associated with altruistic action. She looked at Arden, her iridescent skin shimmering. The system did not reject the data. It accepted it. It registered the input as a positive, stabilizing influence. That is why the cascade happened. It was not a glitch. It was a recalibration. He destabilized the rankings of hundreds of students, Naira hissed, unconvinced. He made us lose points. You lost points, Arden said, his voice quiet. Because you walked right past a person offering you something for free, without a word of acknowledgement. The system, which I had just reminded about empathy, saw that, and it judged you. Seems fair to me. Fair. Naira looked poised to strike him. Enough, Seraphine said. She had heard the one word she needed: recalibration. This human had not broken the system. He had, perhaps, improved it. And that simple, terrifying thought shook her faith to its core. The core was absolute. It did not need improving. And yet, an empathy credit. Her mind replayed the deduction tag: failure to engage unsanctioned social initiative. It was not a penalty for malice. It was a penalty for apathy. Before she could formulate her next command, Arden's wrist interface chimed with a low, dissonant tone. It was not the elegant chime of a student terminal. It was the harsh buzz of a staff summons. He looked at it, then back at the 4 most powerful students in the academy. "Well, it seems I am wanted elsewhere. Must be time to mop something." He offered a brief, unamused smile. "Will I be detained, Pinnacle, or am I free to continue my humble duties?" Seraphine looked at him, her lavender eyes cold and analytical. She was caught. She could not accuse him without revealing the core's vulnerability. She could not hold him without authority. And she was not, she realized, entirely certain that she wanted to. "Go," she said. Arden nodded, sketched a small, mocking bow, and walked out of the kitchens, leaving the 4 of them in a stunned, furious silence. The summons, however, was not for mopping. It was for a meeting, immediate and non-discretionary, with Headmaster Alaric Draith. Draith's office was at the very pinnacle of the academy, a circular room with a transparent floor that looked down, 50 levels, to the atrium where the chaos had begun. The walls were a single, curved pane of smart glass, currently polarized to show the swirling, majestic arms of the Orion Nebula. The room was designed to inspire awe and insignificance. Headmaster Draith sat behind a desk carved from a single, massive piece of obsidian. He was an older man, of a species Arden did not recognize, with skin that looked like polished, ancient wood and eyes that held a placid, reptilian stillness. He gestured to a simple chair. "Mr. Hale," Draith said. His voice was smooth, like oiled machinery. "You have had a very disruptive day." Arden sat. He did not fidget. He did not speak. He met the headmaster's gaze. "I was just reviewing the incident logs from the convocation," Draith continued, lacing his long, 3-jointed fingers together on the desk. "A most curious anomaly. Data streams corrupted, rankings in flux, a great deal of panic." He paused. "And then I requested the security footage from the atrium's lower alcoves. And here, we encounter a second curiosity." He tapped a control on his desk. A screen lit up beside him, showing only static. "It appears," Draith said, his voice laced with a subtle, synthetic sorrow, "that the recorders in that entire sector malfunctioned. A most unfortunate technical failure. We can find no record of what, or who, might have been in that alcove." This was not an interrogation. This was a message. "I know you did it, and I am covering it up." Arden remained silent. He waited. "Ecliptica Academy does not merely train the elite, Mr. Hale," Draith said, rising from his chair to stand before the starscape. "It is the elite. We thrive on order, on predictability, on the absolute, quantifiable certainty of the Veritas Core. Our partners, our benefactors, especially the Orion Funding Committee. They value that predictability above all else." He turned, his still eyes boring into Arden. "I received word this morning. The committee is moving up its annual audit. They will be here within the week. They come expecting to see a flawless, efficient system." He let the threat hang in the cold, starlit air. "It would be tragic," Draith continued, "if some minor internal disruption, some philosophical experiment, were to jeopardize the funding that keeps this academy running. Tragic for everyone, even for the canteen staff." The message was now crystal clear. This was not about ethics. This was about money. Draith did not care about the empathy credit. He cared about the audit. "You are a janitor, Mr. Hale," Draith said, his voice hardening almost imperceptibly. "A man who pushes a cart and cleans the floors. See that you stick to your duties. Do not involve yourself in matters of algorithmic philosophy. Your survey is concluded." "Am I clear?" "Perfectly, Headmaster," Arden said, his voice flat. "You are dismissed." Arden left the office. The crushing pressure of the headmaster's power, the subtle, suffocating threat, left a metallic taste in his mouth. He needed air, or the closest equivalent this high up. He bypassed the elevators and walked to the nearest transport spire, stepping out onto a long, glass observation corridor that bridged the gap between the administrative tower and the student dormitories. The nebula was vast, a chaotic, beautiful smear of cosmic dust and newborn stars. He leaned against the glass, the cold seeping through his thin uniform, and he let the mask of the humble janitor drop. His face tightened with a cold, familiar rage. The view of the nebula reminded him of the swirling, multicolored readout of a biomedical scanner. It reminded him of Maya. The memory was sharp, a shard of glass in his mind. His little sister, Maya. Her body frail, her breathing aided by a filtration unit. She had Cylon immune deficiency, a manageable disease with the right treatment. Treatment that Ecliptica's affiliate medical center was famous for. He had gotten her in. He had pulled every string, used every last bit of his former prestige as a systems architect to get her a slot. And then the system had taken her. Her ranking, a requirement even for patients, had begun to fall. She was too weak for the collaborative learning modules. Her cooperation index plummeted. He remembered the day, seared into his brain, standing in a sterile white room, arguing with a medical administrator, a cold-faced, indifferent official who just pointed at the wall screen. "The Corps has spoken, Mr. Hale," the woman had said, her voice devoid of all sympathy. "Her probability of societal contribution is too low. The advanced treatment slot has been reallocated." He had begged. He had offered to take her place in the rankings. He had offered his own research, his own algorithms. "We cannot make exceptions based on sentiment," the administrator had replied. Maya had died 3 weeks later, and Arden Hale had died with her, replaced by this ghost who mopped floors and plotted the destruction of a god. "He let you go," he started, pulling himself from the memory. Seraphine Valcara was standing a few feet away, her silver hair catching the violet light of the nebula. She must have been waiting for him. "He did not have a choice," Arden said, turning back to the stars. "The evidence is conveniently corrupted." "You are putting this entire institution at risk," she said. Her voice was not angry, as it had been in the kitchen. It was tight, strained, as if she were holding competing thoughts at bay. For what a joke to see the numbers spin. That, finally, broke his control. He turned on her, his eyes blazing with a grief and fury she could not possibly understand. "A joke," he snarled. "You think this is a game you walk these halls, wrapped in the Corps' favor, and you think this is all just a friendly competition." He advanced on her, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of physical fear. He was not a humble janitor. He was something, coiled and dangerous. "You call this order?" he demanded, jabbing a finger toward the academy spire. "It is a machine, Seraphine, a machine that decides who gets to eat, who gets to learn, and who gets to live. And you," he said, his voice dropping, "you are its high priestess." "The Corps is impartial," she defended, her voice wavering. It was the only defense she had, the bedrock of her entire life. "It is blind. It creates fairness." "It creates efficiency," he snapped. "It is a butcher's scale, weighing pounds of flesh. It has no room for the weak, no metric for the person who is having a bad day, no algorithm for mercy. He was close to her now, close enough for her to see the pain etched around his eyes. She could feel the heat radiating from him, an intensity that was both terrifying and magnetic. "You are just one human," she whispered, her argument failing. "You cannot fight the system." He looked at her, and the anger in his face suddenly drained away, replaced by a profound, hollow weariness. He needed to push her away. This unexpected, unwanted spark between them. It was a complication he could not afford. It made him cruel. "Why do you care so much?" he asked, his voice suddenly light and mocking. "Are you afraid you might have to queue for the elevator like a commoner? Or is it more personal?" He tilted his head, a fake, analytical smile playing on his lips. "Did I mess with your private supply of Valkyren salt wafers?" It was a direct hit, a devastatingly precise strike. Her people, the Valkyra, had a unique metabolic response to synthesized sugars. They preferred saline, high-density nutrients. Salted wafers were a private, cultural comfort. He knew that. This human janitor, he had researched her. He had researched her biology, her culture. The revelation was deeply unsettling. She recoiled as if he had slapped her. Her face, which had been conflicted, froze into a mask of cold, aristocratic fury. "You are beneath contempt. And you," he said, his voice soft again, all mockery gone, "are living in a cage and you do not even know it." He turned and walked away, his footsteps silent on the corridor floor, leaving her alone in the cold, purple starlight. That night, Seraphine was in her private quarters, a spacious, minimalist room reserved for the top rank. She was reviewing the data from the convocation. She had isolated the code from Arden's proposal. It was not a virus. It was elegant, a simple, ethical subroutine that queried the core's own passive biometric data. Just as Astra had said, it looked for the telltale dip in heart rate and rise in serotonin associated with altruistic action. It was beautiful, and it was a declaration of war. The words empathy credit and mercy echoed in her head. Her door chimed, a silent, coded light on her interface, a low-priority material transfer, a food delivery. She had not ordered anything. She opened the door. No one was there. A small, insulated box sat on her threshold, the kind used for delivering temperature-sensitive compounds or snacks. Her heart beat a little faster. She brought the box inside, her hands running a full security scan on it. It was clean. She opened it. Inside, on a bed of simple, insulated cloth, was a single, perfectly crafted Valkyren salt wafer. It was not the cheap, synthesized kind from the refectory. It was complex, made with 10 different trace minerals, ground from real sea salt. It was sugar-free, perfectly matching the metabolic needs of her species. It was exactly the way her mother used to have them made, back on her homeworld. Underneath it was a tiny data chip, not an official Ecliptica chip, a piece of scavenged, unmarked tech. She hesitated for only a second before sliding it into her personal terminal. It was not a message. It was not a threat. It was just one line of simple, amber text, glowing on her screen. "Do not let the system define your kindness." She picked up the wafer. He had researched her. He had insulted her with his knowledge, wielding it like a weapon. And then, hours later, he had used that same intimate knowledge to feed her, to offer a gesture of profound, contradictory care. It was a peace offering. It was a challenge. It was, she realized, the most human thing she had ever encountered. She ate the wafer. It tasted like home. The next morning, Seraphine Valkyra walked the halls of Ecliptica Academy. But she was not the same person. The system had not changed. She had, She approached the priority elevator, the one reserved for ranks 1 through 50. As always, it scanned her rank and the doors slid open instantly. Just as she was about to step inside, she heard the frantic pounding of boots on the composite floor. A low-rank student, a young Hyrastian with a case of heavy tools, was running, his crimson face slick with sweat. He was trying to make the staff elevator, but the doors were closing. He was going to be late for a class, a failure that would undoubtedly drop his rank even further. Yesterday, Seraphine would not have noticed him. He would have been background noise. Today, she saw the desperation in his eyes. She saw the panic. She stepped into the priority elevator and held her hand over the door sensor, stopping it from closing. The Hyrastian student skidded to a halt, freezing in terror. He had almost run into Pinnacle Valkara. That alone was a disciplinary infraction. He stared at her, wide-eyed, expecting to be reported, to be ranked down into oblivion. Seraphine just looked at him. "The priority elevator," she said, her voice calm, "is also going to the engineering level." He stared. "But, Pinnacle, I cannot." "Get in," she said. "You will be late." He scrambled in, bowing his head so low his chin nearly touched his chest. "Thank you, Pinnacle. Thank you." The doors closed, sealing the two of them inside. Later that day, she did not go to the Pinnacle's private dining alcove for lunch. She went to the main refectory. She got in the main line. She watched as the high-rank students ahead of her received synthesized proteins, fresh hydrofruits, nutrient-rich broths. Then, she reached the divider. The line split. On the other side, the menu changed. The low-rank students, the ones Arden had spoken for, were receiving a grayish, congealed nutrient paste. It was rationed by a stern-faced server. Seraphine had always known this. She had seen it, but she had never seen it. She had accepted it. It was the order she had defended. It was the fairness she had believed in, the efficient allocation of resources. She felt a cold, unfamiliar sensation rise in her chest. It was a visceral, sickening feeling. It was, she realized, shame. She looked at the gray paste. She thought of Arden's angry, pain-filled eyes. She thought of the salt wafer. She thought of his words. "A cage, and you do not even know it." When she reached the server, she pushed her high-rank tray back. "I will have what they are having," she said, pointing to the gray paste. The server, the students in line, the entire cafeteria, went utterly silent. "Pinnacle," the server stammered. That is the standard ration. You are entitled to the executive menu." "I am aware," Seraphine said. "Give me the standard ration." Numbly, the server scooped the gray paste onto a low-grade tray and handed it to her. Seraphine took the tray, and in front of the entire, watching student body, she walked past the reserved Pinnacle tables. She went to the far corner, to the chipped, utilitarian tables where the low-rank students sat, and she sat down with them. The revolution had begun, not with an algorithm, but with a lunch tray. The Academy's response was not a shout. It was a cold, digital whisper that changed the air pressure in every room. The morning after Seraphine's silent protest in the refectory, every student terminal chimed with an update. The Veritas Corps had received a mandatory patch. It was not announced with any fanfare. It was simply there. A new metric had been integrated. It was called the Discipline Index. In the sterile language of the patch notes, the index was designed to reward institutional harmony and penalize disruptive or non-sanctioned social experimentation. Its effect was immediate and brutal. Students who had participated in Arden's survey found their ranking gains from the empathy credit had not only vanished, but had been replaced with a corresponding penalty. The algorithm was punitive. It did not just reset the score, It punished the attempt. Seraphine's own rank, which had recovered, now showed a flashing amber warning. Her unsanctioned acts, letting the Hyrastian into the elevator, eating the low-rank meal, had been logged by the omnipresent system. They were now classified not as empathy, but as deviations. She was still Pinnacle 1. But her buffer was gone. She was on notice. The system was fighting back. Headmaster Draith, it was clear, did not need to make accusations. He had simply redefined Arden's goodwill as a crime. The real-world consequences followed the digital ones. Throughout the day, low-rank students, especially those who had been in the alcove, were singled out for random compliance scans. Prefects, armed with new authority, roamed the lower-level corridors, their faces set in grim, officious masks. Arden was scrubbing a protein synthesizer when he heard the commotion. It was 2 corridors over, near the low-rank dormitories. He moved quickly, his janitor's cart providing the perfect cover. He found them surrounding a young student named Jax Omandi. Jax was a Xandarian, a thin, nervous boy with pale blue skin, who had a gift for fixing anything. He was one of the few people Arden had spoken to beyond simple pleasantries. Jax was currently being held by 2 prefects, his toolkit spilled on the floor. "I was just fixing the atmospheric sensor for our dorm," Jax pleaded, his voice high with terror. "It has been leaking condensation for weeks. I was just—" "The charge is sensor tampering," the senior prefect said, his voice a monotone. He pointed to the panel Jax had been working on. "This is a restricted data nexus. You are not authorized." "It is a humidifier," Jax cried. "It is just a filter. It is not connected to the core." The system registered an unauthorized interface with a restricted panel. The prefect droned. "Your ranking is now under disciplinary review. You will come with us." They hauled him away. Arden watched from the corridor junction, his hands gripping the handle of his cart so tightly his knuckles were white. He knew that panel. It was just a filter. It had no connection to the core whatsoever. But Jax had been targeted. The system was not just punishing, it was hunting. It was making examples. And it was starting with his friends. He spent the next 12 hours not cleaning, but coding. He sequestered himself in a forgotten data closet, his terminal patched into the Academy's network through a series of shielded, untraceable relays. He was not hacking. He was analyzing. He pulled the data logs for every single disciplinary action related to the new index. He cross-referenced them with the original list of students who had received the empathy credit. Then, he went deeper. He pulled the demographic data, planetary origin, species, socio-economic quintile on their homeworlds. By the time the moon's primary eclipse passed, he had it. It was not just a pattern. It was a blueprint, a cold, mathematical architecture of prejudice. He had to show Seraphine. He found her not in her quarters, but in the place he knew she would be the central data archive, a vast, silent cathedral of glowing data stacks. She was alone, running her own analysis, her face pale and strained in the blue holographic light. "He is targeting them," Arden said, his voice startling her. He stepped out of the shadow of a server column. "You should not be in here," she said, her voice low, but she did not call for security. Her eyes were on the graphs she had been running. Graphs that clearly showed the same thing he had. "It is not random. The penalties. They are not proportional." "No," Arden said. He slid his own terminal onto the console next to hers. "They are not. They are targeted." He brought up his graph. It was a devastating, 3-dimensional scatterplot. The x-axis showed a student's rank. The y-axis showed their penalty under the discipline index. And the z-axis, the one the Academy always pretended not to see, showed their species. The data was undeniable. Students from established, wealthy worlds like her own, the Valkyran, or the Hyrastian, received minor penalties, warnings. Students from border worlds, from developing species, from politically non-aligned systems like Jax's, the Xandarian, received the maximum. They were being culled from the system. Seraphine stared at it, her hand rising to her mouth. No. The core is... It is supposed to be impartial. The core is a set of rules. Seraphine, Arden said, his voice harsh. And someone just rewrote the rules to protect his allies and punish his enemies. This is not justice. This is a purge. She sank into the console chair, the image of Jax Amandi's terrified face flashing in her mind. She had seen him being led away. She had done nothing. Draith, she whispered. He is using the core to enforce a bias, an origin bias. And he is hiding it, Arden said. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. This is just the surface. This is what he is letting us see. What is he not letting us see when he fixed my patch? He did more than just install the discipline index. He added something else, a new subroutine. It is deep, it is shielded, and it is collecting something it should not be. What? She asked. Intent, Arden said. It is not just logging what you do. It is trying to log what you think you are doing. It is reading biofeedback, neural wave harmonics, vocal stress patterns, and it is running it all through a new predictive model. That is impossible, Seraphine said. That would require a processing key, a frequency lock. That is beyond the core's mandate. Not if you had, say, a specialist in acoustic neurophysics on your staff, Arden said. Seraphine's blood went cold. Astra. Not her fault, Arden said quickly. He has taken her research and weaponized it. He is building a file on every student, not just of their actions, but of their potential, loyalty. And I cannot read it. I cannot even prove it is happening. The entire subroutine is encrypted with an acoustic key, a complex harmonic sequence. A Signian frequency lock, Seraphine breathed. Astra's personal research key. Exactly, Arden said. And I need it. She looked at him, the full implication of his request landing on her. He was asking her to steal from her teammate. He was asking her, Pinnacle 1, to commit an act of academic espionage that would, if she were caught, not just drop her rank, it would expel her. If you are right, she said slowly, this is worse than bias. This is thought policing. He is building a database of dissent. And with the Orion Audit Committee on its way, Arden finished. He is about to present them with a new product, a school that can not only rank students, but predict their future loyalty. He is not just saving his job. He is angling for a promotion. She looked at the graph. She thought of Jax. She thought of the cold, reptilian stillness in Draith's eyes. Astra's research archive is in the oral dynamics wing, she said, her voice firm. Her lab is shielded, but her data is backed up to a central server. It is triple encrypted. But the terminal in her private study, it has a direct, hardline access port. She stood up. You will need me to get you in. It was a long, tense walk across the academy. Seraphine, in her pinnacle-marked uniform, moved with purpose. Arden, pushing a wheeled floor scrubber this time, followed 10 paces behind, the very image of a servant. He was invisible. She was anything but. Naira Ilex watched them go. She had been tracking Seraphine ever since the refectory incident. She had seen her leader's deviation. She saw it, not as empathy, but as a weakness, a vulnerability. And Seraphine Valkara was not allowed to be weak. Nira was a tactician. She believed in the system. The system had recognized her brilliance. The system had given her power. This human, this grub, was a virus, and Seraphine, her own leader, was now a carrier. She watched them enter the oral dynamics wing, a place Seraphine had no scheduled business. She watched the human janitor follow her. Naira did not follow them. She did not need to. She raised her personal terminal, activated its long-range image capture function, and zoomed in. The lens was powerful, penetrating the twilight shadows of the corridor. She took 3 clear, damning images. Pinnacle 1, Seraphine Valkyra, consorting with the human insurgent, slinking through restricted corridors. The political value of the images was, Naira calculated, immense. She opened a secure channel, not to Seraphine, not to Tamsin. She addressed the message to the office of Headmaster Alaric Draith. She attached the images. She wrote no text. None was needed. It was a move on the board, a reaffirmation of her own loyalty, a political sacrifice of her leader, for the good of the system. She sent it. Astra's study was dark. The walls were covered in sound-dampening foam, creating a silence so absolute it was almost painful. Seraphine activated a single, low light. The only object in the room was a console and a chair, surrounded by what looked like tuning forks, each the size of a man's arm. "The terminal," Seraphine whispered, pointing. Arden moved to it. He did not touch it. He pulled a small interface from his belt, a spider-like device of his own making, and attached it to the port. "I am not stealing her research," he said, as if reading her mind. "I am not even copying it. I just need the key, the harmonic signature. My device will listen for it, record the sequence, and that is it. 3 minutes." "He will know," Seraphine said, her voice barely audible in the dead air. "Draith will know you have it." "He will know someone does," Arden corrected. He was working quickly, his fingers a blur on his own terminal. "He will not know it is me." The silence of the room stretched. They were standing close, shoulder to shoulder, in the small, dark space. Seraphine could feel the warmth from his body. She could smell the faint, clean scent of the sterilization soap from his uniform, mixed with something else, something metallic and warm. It was the scent of his skin. The proximity was distracting, unsettling. "You are risking everything," he murmured, his eyes on his screen. "Why?" "You showed me that graph," she whispered. "I cannot unsee it. I cannot be the top of a system that does that. What about your friend Astra? We are violating her trust." "I am protecting her," Seraphine said, though the words tasted like a lie. "Draith is using her. She would be horrified if she knew." "Maybe," Arden said. "Or maybe she would be loyal to the headmaster. It is easy to be horrified when you have nothing to lose." His words stung, and she had no answer. "It is done," he said suddenly. He detached his device, and the room was plunged back into darkness. "I have the key." He turned to her. In the almost total blackness, she could see only the faint outline of his face, the gleam of his eyes. "Thank you," he said. The words were simple, stripped of all mockery. "Do not thank me," she replied, her voice shaky. "Just tell me what you are going to do with it." They left the studio, the silence between them heavier than before. They reached the main corridor, and she felt the need to say something, to stop him. "Arden," she said. He stopped, turning to her. "When you find what you are looking for, when you prove it, what happens then?" His face hardened, the brief moment of gratitude vanishing, replaced by the cold, familiar fire she had seen in the observation corridor. "Then I burn it to the ground," he said, his voice a low, vicious promise. "I am going to pull down the entire algorithmic throne that Draith is building, and I am going to make him answer for what he did." What he did, she asked. Or what he did to you. He was silent. I saw your file, she admitted, and he stiffened. The real one. The one Drath thinks is buried. I know who you are. I know what happened to your sister. The rage in his eyes was instantly replaced by a sharp, devastating pain. It was so raw that she flinched. Do not, he choked out, his voice thick. You do not get to use her name. I am not, Seraphine said, stepping closer, her voice fierce and low. I am trying to save you. You are not just angry, Arden. You are grieving. And you are going to let that grief burn this whole place to the ground. It deserves to burn, he hissed. And what about the students? She shot back. What about Jax? What about the hundreds of low-rank kids who are just trying to survive? That throne you want to topple. It is sitting on top of innocent students. You burn it all down. And they burn with it. Is that your justice? Will that save your sister? He had no answer. The raw truth of her words hung between them, a blade he could not parry. He just stared at her, his face a mask of conflict. He wanted to hate her. She was the system. She was everything he had come to destroy. But she was not. She was the one who had helped him. She was the one who saw the bias. And she was the only one who had ever called him on his real, unspoken motive. Just be careful, she said, her voice softening. He knows you are here. He is watching you. And now, he is watching me too. She turned and walked away, her own pinnacle braid seeming, for the first time, like a chain around her neck. Arden did not go back to his quarters. He needed to think. He needed a place to work, a place with power and shielding. He went to the sub-level engineering bay, a place he often cleaned late at night. He was patching his terminal into a power conduit when a voice, loud and clear, echoed from the shadows. That is a very interesting electromagnetic field you are generating. Snack man. Arden dropped into a defensive crouch, his hand moving to a high-voltage tool on his belt. Tamsin Core stepped out from behind a massive, dormant cooling unit. She was not in uniform. She was in a work smock, and on her hands, she wore a pair of gleaming, intricate kinetic gloves. They were humming with a low, powerful energy. Pinnacle Core, Arden said, his voice wary. Late-night repairs. You could say that, Tamsin said. Her voice was not hostile, like Naira's. It was intensely curious. I have been tracking your power signatures, your cart, your little sensor array, and now this. She pointed to his terminal. You are running a frequency decryption, a very, very complex one. That is not janitor's work. I have a lot of hobbies, Arden said. I bet. She flexed her fingers, and the air around her gloves crackled. I do not care about the rankings. Human. I care about how you made the core recalibrate with a snack cart. That is the most beautiful piece of engineering I have seen all year. But now, you are messing with frequencies. That is my territory. She took a step closer. So, you are going to show me what you are doing. Or I am going to take that terminal from you. Your choice. I am not looking for a fight, Arden said, slowly rising. Good. Because I am. Tamsin grinned, and she lunged. She was fast. Impossibly fast for her size. Her gloved hand sliced at him. Not to hit, but to grab his terminal. Arden dodged, the displaced air from her glove slamming into the wall behind him with a thump that dented the metal. Kinetic feedback gloves, Arden observed, ducking under another swipe. Nice, custom build. Stop talking! Start showing, Tamsin yelled, clearly enjoying herself. She was all power. He was all leverage. He could not beat her strength, so he had to use the environment. He dodged behind a conduit, letting her fist slam into it, sending sparks flying. You are going to blow a relay, he shouted. I can fix it later, she shot back. She had him cornered against a large, humming refrigeration unit. Last chance. Snack man. You are right, Arden said, breathing hard. It is my last chance. He looked not at her, but at the unit behind him. He saw the diagnostic panel. He saw the magnetic coolant pump. You know, he panted, the problem with these old coolant units. What are you talking about? Tamsin said, advancing. Is the magnetic seals. They leak. They generate a false electromagnetic rill. He slammed his hand onto the diagnostic panel, forcing a manual override. He did not attack her. He triggered a full, emergency magnetic flush of the coolant system. A high-pitched whine filled the air. Tamsin's gloves, which ran on high-energy magnetic containment, suddenly went haywire. The feedback loop was instantaneous. The power did not just shut off. It reversed, feeding back into her gauntlets. Oh, slag! Tamsin yelped, as her gloves seized up, freezing her hands in midair, caught in their own magnetic field. She was, effectively, paralyzed by her own technology. She teetered, frozen, and then fell over with a heavy, metallic clang. Arden stood over her, panting. He pulled a small, foil-wrapped object from his pocket. You win, Tamsin groaned from the floor, her hands still stuck in the air. What is that? Arden began unwrapping it. Peace offering. He knelt and held it out to her. It was a sandwich. A real, actual sandwich, with processed protein and synthesized, nutrient-rich bread. How? She grumbled, unable to move her hands to take it. Arden sighed. He sat on the floor next to her, tore a piece off, and held it up to her mouth. Open up. Tamsin, the toughest, most brilliant engineer in her class, glared at him for a second, then sheepishly took the bite. She chewed. Her eyes widened. This is not bad, she admitted. Where did you get real bread? I am the snack man, Arden said, taking a bite himself. I have my sources. They sat in silence for a moment, the engineer and the saboteur, sharing a sandwich on the floor of a machine room. So, Tamsin said, her voice muffled. Acoustic frequency decryption. You are going after Draith's pet project. Are you not? Arden froze. You knew about that. I am a tech head, human, she said. I read the deep logs. I saw the new subroutine. I just could not crack the key. And I know it is Astra's. Draith thinks he is being clever, but he is just a manipulative old fool. She looked at him. You are not trying to burn the school down. You are just fixing the plumbing. Something like that, Arden said. Good, Tamsin said. Because I was going to have to break your legs. But now, I think I am going to help you. She wiggled her fingers. Now, can you please shut off this magnetic flush? My hands are going numb. The next day, the entire academy was in a new state of panic. The Orion Funding Committee had not just moved up its audit. They had arrived. They were here, a full week ahead of schedule. Their sleek, black-as-space shuttle already docked at the headmaster's private spire. The news spread, and with it, a new level of fear. Draith was cornered. A campus-wide summons was issued for that afternoon. An emergency convocation. The committee, it seemed, would be in attendance. Headmaster Draith took the stage in the atrium. He looked calm, placid, in control. He welcomed the committee members, who sat in the front row, their faces impassive. In light of the minor systemic fluctuations our academy has recently experienced, Draith began, his smooth voice rolling over the hushed crowd. Our esteemed partners on the Orion Funding Committee have requested a demonstration, a reassurance of the stability, integrity, and perfection of the Veritas Core. A murmur went through the crowd. "They wish to see the system in action," Drath announced. "And so, we shall give it to them. We will be holding a live ranking demonstration, a showcase of our finest." His eyes scanned the crowd, and for a second, they seemed to land on Arden, who was standing in the back, in his janitor's uniform. "Our pinnacle team, Seraphine Valkara, Naira Ilex, Tamsin Kaur, and Astra Kell will participate. They will be dropped into the Academy's Class 4 simulation biosphere, a survival exercise. We will watch, in real time, as the Veritas Core monitors, analyzes, and ranks their performance, their collaboration, their efficiency." Seraphine, standing with her team, felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This was a political spectacle, a dog and pony show. "It will be a rigorous test," Drath continued, a faint, cold smile on his lips. "And such a test requires support. The biosphere is an unpredictable environment. The team will require a non-combatant attendant, someone to manage their supplies, to maintain their base camp, to handle the incidentals." He looked directly at Arden. "The refectory has nominated a volunteer for this duty, Mr. Arden Hale. He will be accompanying the Pinnacle team into the biosphere as their canteen escort." It was a checkmate, a brilliant, vicious, political checkmate. Arden was trapped. Seraphine was trapped. He could not refuse. It would be insubordination. He could not act. He would be in a hostile environment, surrounded by his targets, with no power. He was being forced to participate in the very game he had come to destroy. Drath smiled. "Let the demonstration begin." The biosphere simulation was not a jungle. It was a lie. It was a vast, domed chamber, a kilometer wide, filled with genetically engineered flora that looked menacing, but was perfectly sterile. The air was recycled, given a synthetic, mossy scent. The sky was a holographic projection, currently set to a sickly, twilight orange. Everything was controlled. At least, it was supposed to be. "Team, form up," Seraphine ordered, her voice crisp in their comms. She, Naira, Tamsin, and Astra stood on the damp, composite rock platform where the transport had dropped them. Arden, in his humiliating canteen-issue jumpsuit, stood slightly behind them, holding two heavy-looking supply cases. "Objective is simple," Seraphine continued, her eyes scanning the dense, fake undergrowth. "Reach the extraction point on the far side of the dome in under 3 hours. Performance is measured by speed, efficiency, and resource management. We stick to the plan." Naira sniffed the air. "It stinks. And this escort," she jested at Arden, "is a liability. He will slow us down." "I am excellent at carrying things," Arden said, his voice flat and bored. "And I make a wonderful human shield. My rank is so low. My death penalty is probably just a data entry fine." "Quiet, both of you," Seraphine snapped. Tamsin, however, was not listening. She was staring at her kinetic gloves, her brow furrowed. "Something is wrong. The ambient energy in here is high. My gloves are having trouble calibrating." Before she could finish, Astra Kell put her hands to her temples, a small cry of pain escaping her. "The air," she whispered. "It is not the smell. It is the sound. There is a frequency. It is wrong." As if her words were a cue, the holographic sky flickered. It did not just flicker. It stuttered, and a deep, subsonic thrum vibrated through the soles of their boots. "What was that?" Naira demanded, drawing a compact kinetic sidearm. Arden had his head tilted, just like Astra. He was listening. "That," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "is not on the objective list." A flash of light, brighter than the fake sun, lit the dome. It was not a lightning bolt. It was a wave of raw, electromagnetic energy. It sizzled through the air, and every piece of their advanced technology screamed in protest. EM surge, Tamsin yelled, instinctively raising her hands. Her kinetic gloves lit up, creating a warped, shimmering bubble around the team. The energy wave hit the shield and split, crackling around them. Tamsin grunted, her knees buckling. The feedback. It is too strong. Tamsin, drop it, Seraphine shouted. Tamsin roared as the gloves overloaded. There was a sharp, popping sound, like a circuit frying, and the smell of burnt insulation and seared flesh. Tamsin fell to one knee, clutching her right hand. Her crimson skin blackened around the edges of the smoking glove. The entire biosphere was now in chaos. The holographic sky was a storm of static. The lights were flickering. And the noise. The noise was a high, piercing, multi-layered whine. "Comms are down," Naira shouted, tapping her useless earpiece. "External link is dead." But Arden and Astra were staring at each other, their faces pale with a shared, terrible realization. "You hear it, do you not?" Arden said, his voice cutting through the noise. "It is her," Astra whispered, her whole body trembling. "It is my key, my acoustic frequency." Arden nodded, his face a mask of grim understanding. The storm was not an accident. The malfunction was not a malfunction. It was a broadcast. Someone was using Astra's unique, complex harmonic key to override the entire biosphere's safety protocols. Someone was in control, and that someone was Headmaster Draith. "This is not a test," Arden said. "It is a trap." As if to prove his point, the ground beneath them heaved. A localized tremor, another malfunction, cracked the very platform they were on. A deep fissure opened between them. "Split!" Seraphine yelled. It was too late. The platform broke apart. Seraphine and Naira were thrown one way, toward the rocky interior. Tamsin, Astra, and Arden were thrown the other, toward the dense, artificial forest. The chasm between them was now 10 meters wide, and vanishing into darkness. "Seraphine!" Tamsin roared, her injured hand held to her chest. "Go!" Seraphine's voice was a faint echo from the other side. "Stick to the objective. Get to the extraction point. That is an order." "She is right," Naira's voice followed. "We move," and their figures vanished into the gloom. "Slag it," Tamsin cursed, helping Astra to her feet. "What now? Snackman, you are the escort." Arden was already looking at the forest. "Now, we find a way across. And we find a way to shut this broadcast down." He looked at Tamsin's hand. But first, he knelt, popping the locks on one of the supply cases. It was, as he had suspected, filled with his own products, snack bars, nutrient pastes, high-carb wafers. "You have got to be kidding me," Tamsin said. "Never," Arden said. He pulled out a small, foil-wrapped tube. It was a high-protein, zero-G nutrient gel. He ripped it open, then gently took Tamsin's burned hand. "This is going to sting," he said. "I am Hyrastian," she growled. "I can take—" He smeared the gel over the burns. Tamsin hissed, a sharp intake of breath. The gel was a pale, antiseptic green. "It is a nutrient paste," Arden explained, his hands working quickly, wrapping the wound with a sterile cloth from a first aid kit. "It is designed for rapid cell regeneration and nutrient delivery. Good for internal or external application. Apparently." Tamsin looked at the makeshift bandage. "You put a sandwich filling on my hand." "It is a high-performance, multi-purpose food product," Arden corrected her, his face serious. "Snack food. Saves lives. Tastes good, too." Tamsin flexed her bandaged hand. The stinging was already fading, replaced by a cool, numb sensation. "Do not eat my bandage," she grumbled. but there was a new respect in her eyes. "All right, tech head. You and me, Astra. Let's move." On the other side of the chasm, Seraphine and Nera were navigating a treacherous, narrow ravine. The static in the air was so thick it was almost visible, and the holographic sky was now flashing with disorienting, strobing images. "This entire simulation is compromised," Seraphine said, leaping over a gap. "Draith is pushing this too far. The committee will see this as a failure." "Or," Nera said, her voice a low, calculating hiss, "they will see it as a high-stress field test. They will see us fail, and Draith will have the perfect excuse to blame the fluctuations on an insurgent." Seraphine froze. "He is trying to make us the scapegoats for Arden's hack." "He is trying to win," Nera said. "He is a tactician. He has put us in an unwinnable scenario. And you brought the human." Before Seraphine could reply, a new sound reached them, a low, wet, hissing sound. From the cracks in the rock walls, a fog was pouring. It was not a natural mist. It was a pale, yellow-green gas, and it clung to the ground. "Optical poison!" Nera snapped, her Xylothian heritage making her instantly recognize the threat. "It is a neuroagent. It causes disorientation, blindness, then paralysis. We have to get to high ground. Now." They ran. But the gas was faster, pouring into the ravine like water. As they rounded a sharp corner, they almost fell over a third figure. It was a student, a freshman, Caden, from a lower-ranked team. His uniform already torn. He was breathing heavily, his eyes wide with terror. "Pinnacle," he gasped, relief flooding his face. I was assigned as a secondary control group. I got separated. The fog." "He is slowing us down," Nera said, her voice absolute ice. "We leave him." "We do not," Seraphine said, her voice just as cold, just as absolute. She grabbed Caden's arm. "You are with us. Move." "Your empathy is going to get us all killed, Seraphine," Nera snarled. "Your logic is what Arden is fighting against," Seraphine shot back. They scrambled up a rock face, the fog hissing at their heels. At the top, a dead end, a solid, 10-meter-high cliff face. But to their left, there was a dark, square opening. A maintenance tunnel, a heavy steel door, marked with a restricted access panel, blocked their path. "A way out," Seraphine said. She ran to the panel, pressing her hand against it. The panel flashed red. "Access denied. Pinnacle override failed." "What?" Seraphine said, dumbfounded. "My rank should open any door in this facility." "He locked us in," Nera breathed, a new, dawning horror in her eyes. "This is not a trap. It is an execution. He is live editing the simulation. He is killing us." The fog was rising, swirling around their ankles. Caden collapsed, coughing. "Help! Me!" A voice crackled over their dead comms. Seraphine's head snapped up. On the cliff above them, a figure was silhouetted against the strobing, static sky. It was Arden. "He found a way over," Seraphine whispered. "How are you?" "I am in the maintenance network. The chasm had a service bridge. Listen to me." His voice was strained, filled with static. "Draith is not just running the simulation. He is harvesting it. Astra has a link. He is feeding the emotional data, all the fear and panic, to his predictive model." "He is training it," Seraphine said, her blood cold. "He is using us as bait." "Exactly. The fog. It is not lethal. Not yet. But the panel. He has locked you out." "We know," Nera yelled, as Caden retched. "Seraphine!" Arden's voice was in her ear, and her ear alone, a private channel. "I can get that door open, but I have to do it from your end. I have to override the override. But I am coming down." "Do not," she said. "The fog. It is too high." "I am the escort," he said. "Escorting you is the objective." He was gone from the cliff edge. 2 minutes later, he dropped from a ventilation shaft inside the tunnel, on the other side of the locked door. He was coughing, his eyes streaming from the traces of the fog he had passed through. He ran to the internal control panel. "He has this thing locked down with his own protocols," he panted, his fingers flying over the interface. He was not just typing. He was coding. He was ripping the door's software apart. Seraphine watched him through the small, reinforced window. The way he moved. The way he bypassed command prompts, using back-end codes she had never even seen. This was not a janitor. This was not a student. This was an architect. "Who are you?" she whispered, her hand flat against the cold glass. He looked up, his face pale, his eyes burning with an intensity she had only seen glimpses of. He did not answer. He did not have to. His eyes, in that moment, confessed everything. He was the ghost. He was the prodigy. He was the man who had come to burn it all down. The door hissed. It was not opening. "He is fighting me," Arden choked out. "The system is actively resisting the override." "Arden," Seraphine yelled. The fog was at her waist. Naira was holding Caden up, but she was wavering. "I cannot break his encryption, not from here." He slammed his fist against the panel. "He has locked it down." "Then do not break it," Seraphine said, her mind racing. "You said you were in the maintenance network. Do not use your rank. Use his—" Arden looked at her, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "Use his—" He turned back to the panel. He did not try to override the lock. He bypassed it. He accessed the physical controls, the inertial dampeners, the magnetic locks. "What are you?" "I am not opening the door," Arden said. "I am moving it." He found the inertial field controls for that sector. He poured all available power into them, overriding the safeties. "Get back!" he yelled. Seraphine and Nira dragged Caden back. With a groan that shook the entire mountain, the 2-ton steel door did not open. It tore free of its hinges, propelled by a localized, focused inertial blast, and flew down the corridor away from them. Arden was thrown back by the feedback, a shower of sparks raining down on him. Seraphine, Naira, and Caden scrambled through the smoking opening, gasping for the cleaner air inside. The fog billowed in behind them. But the tunnel's automated containment systems kicked in, slamming a second, interior door shut, sealing them in. They were in a dark, narrow tunnel. The only light was from the red emergency strips on the floor. Naira had Caden, who was now unconscious. Seraphine ran to Arden. He was on the ground, his body armor smoking. "Arden, are you hurt?" "My rank just went to 0. He coughed, a grin on his face. I destroyed 1,000,000 credits worth of Academy property. I am so expelled." "You are an idiot," she said, her voice shaking. She grabbed his arm, pulling him up. "You are a complete, absolute, brilliant idiot." He stumbled, leaning on her. The proximity, the smell of burnt electronics and his skin, the solid, warm presence of him. It was overwhelming. "The fog," he gasped. "My rebreather. It is in my pack." She helped him unhook his supply case. He fumbled with the lock, his hands shaking. He pulled out a single, small rebreather mask. He looked at her. He looked at Naira, who was watching them, her face a mask of calculation. "There is only one," he said. "I know," Seraphine replied. He pushed it toward her. You are Pinnacle. You are the objective." "No," she said, pushing it back. You saved us. You are compromised by the fog. You take it. This is a stupid... Time to argue, he coughed. A racking, wet sound. Then do not argue, she said. She took the mask, activated it, and pressed it against his face. Breathe. He inhaled, the clean air flooding his lungs. He breathed for 3 seconds, then pulled the mask away, his head clearing. He shoved it back at her. Your turn. She took it, took a breath, and gave it back. This is inefficient, Neera said from the darkness. Her voice was flat. Give it to me. They both looked at her. Caden is unconscious, Neera stated. He is Xandarian. His respiratory system is more resilient. He will be fine for now. I am Xylothian, my species. We do not breathe fog. We do not breathe at all. Seraphine and Arden just stared. Neera tapped the smooth, bark-like skin on her throat. Osmotic exchange. I get my oxygen through my skin. This fog, she gestured. It is an irritant, but it will not kill me. You two, however, you are pathetic, air-breathing mammals. Arden let out a choked laugh. Well, that is good to know. Give me the mask, Neera ordered. Seraphine handed it to her. Neera did not put it on. She turned, knelt by Caden, and affixed the mask to the unconscious freshman's face. Seraphine and Arden gaped at her. What? Neera snapped, standing up. His vital signs were dropping. It was a tactical decision. His survival is now weighted as part of our team metric. Allowing him to die would be inefficient. Seraphine looked at her strategist, and for the first time, she saw something more than cold calculation. Neera was lying. It was a terrible, beautiful lie. We have to move, Arden said, his voice raw. But I do not know where we are. I do, Neera said. She pointed down the dark tunnel. This is a primary data conduit. I have seen the schematics. This tunnel, it leads to the central relay station for the entire biosphere. It is where Draith would be. She is right. A new, tinny voice crackled in the tunnel. It was coming from Arden's comm unit, which he had been shielding. Tamsin, Arden said. And Astra. The engineer's voice came through, filled with static. We are in the forest, but Arden, Astra, she did something. He was harvesting us. Astra's own voice came through, thin and reedy. He was taking our fear, so I gave him something else. I am blocking his signal. What did you do? Seraphine demanded. She is singing, Tamsin said, and there was awe in her voice. She is using my damaged comms, boosting her own neural frequency. And she is broadcasting. She is pushing her own harmonic hymn back at him. On his private channel, she has blocked his access. He cannot control the simulation anymore. In the Grand Atrium, 2 kilometers away, the audit committee was watching the main screen in horror. They had seen the team separated. They had seen Seraphine's performance score plummet as she was trapped. Headmaster Draith had been smiling, a calm, sad expression on his face, as he prepared to explain the tragic but necessary failure of his team under insurgent pressure. Then, everything had changed. A new metric had appeared on the board. A metric he did not recognize. Mutual Protection Index. He watched, his blood turning to ice, as the scores reversed. He saw Arden Hale override restricted lock, penalty 10,000 credits, followed by Seraphine Valkara team score, gained 20,000 points, mutual protection. He saw Neera Ilex provide aid to non-combatant, gained 5,000 points. He saw the whole board light up with this new, unauthorized metric. The humans, empathy code. The one he had tried to erase. It was back. Emergency correction. Drath snapped to his private terminal. Override, override. But nothing happened. The screen flashed. Connection interrupted. Harmonic signature conflict. Astra was blocking him. The committee members were no longer looking at the screen. They were looking at him. Their faces were not impassive. They were cold. They were suspicious. Headmaster, the lead auditor said, her voice quiet and sharp. You assured us this system was perfect. It appears to be arguing with itself. In the tunnel, Arden, Seraphine, and Naira were running. The relay station is just ahead, Naira said. He is there. I know it. No, Arden said. His terminal, now hard linked to the tunnel's data conduit, flashing. He is not. He is back in the atrium. But I have access. Tamsin, Astra, are you there? We are here, Tamsin's voice replied. Astra is. She is working. But the system is fighting back. I am in, Arden said, his fingers flying. I have the core. I am shutting down the simulation. No, Seraphine said, grabbing his hand, stopping him. The contact was electric, a jolt that had nothing to do with the storm. Do not shut it down. He looked at her, confused. You said it yourself, she said, her eyes intense, her grip tightening on his hand. You cannot just burn it down. You have to fix it. He wanted a demonstration. Let's give him one. Arden looked at her, and he understood. He did not shut the simulation down. He opened the back door he had found. The old code. His sister's code. And, with Seraphine Valcara's hand still on his, he reactivated the empathy credit. For the entire academy. The atrium was not a hall of learning. It was a courtroom. The return from the biosphere had been a blur. The simulation had been shut down, the dome's lights brought up, and the 5 participants, 4 pinnacles and 1 janitor, had been escorted out, not by medics, but by Academy security. Seraphine, Arden, Nira, Tamsin, and Astra. Tamsin was half carrying the exhausted Signian, were brought directly to the main stage of the atrium. Caden, the freshman, had been whisked away to the medical bay, his rebreather mask still on his face. The Orion Funding Committee sat in the front row, their faces no longer suspicious, but carved from granite. The entire student body, summoned from their dorms and study halls, filled the vast space, their collective murmur a low, anxious thunder. Headmaster Alaric Drath stood at the central podium. He did not look like a man who had just lost control. He looked like a grieving head of state. He was composed, saddened, and absolutely, terrifyingly, in command. This, Drath began, his smooth voice amplified throughout the atrium, is a tragedy and a betrayal. He let the words hang. The live ranking demonstration, a showcase meant to reaffirm our faith in the flawless logic of the Veritas Core, was sabotaged, corrupted, by a malicious agent, a saboteur who has been working, not for days, but for weeks, to undermine the very foundations of this academy. His still, reptilian eyes moved, landing on the one person on the stage, not in a pinnacle uniform. The one person, still in a smoke-stained, torn canteen jumpsuit. A saboteur, Drath continued, who used his lowly position to gain access, to plant devices, to sow chaos, and ultimately, to endanger the lives of our finest students in a cowardly act of technological terrorism. A massive screen lit up behind him. It was security footage, not from the biosphere that was still corrupted. It was from the maintenance tunnel. It was a close-up, high-definition recording of Arden's face, pale and strained, his hands flying over the internal control panel of the locked door. The footage was damning. It showed him forcing the manual override, bypassing security protocols. His expression one of fierce, desperate concentration. And then, it showed the result. The 2-ton steel door ripping free of its hinges in a shower of sparks and smoke. The atrium exploded in gasps. It was an act of unthinkable violence and destruction. "The evidence is clear," Draith said, his voice ringing with false sorrow. Mr. Arden Hale, a canteen worker, did willfully and maliciously sabotage the Class 4 biosphere, override critical safety protocols, and destroy Academy property, all in a deluded attempt to break the ranking. He will be handed over to the conglomerate authorities for prosecution. The committee members were nodding. This was the answer they wanted. A single, disposable, human scapegoat. Arden, who had been standing silently, his head down, finally looked up. He looked at Draith, and he smiled. "You are right about one thing, Headmaster," Arden said. His voice was raw from the fog, but it carried in the sudden, shocked silence. No one, not even a pinnacle, spoke to the headmaster like that. "I did override that door." He stepped forward, away from Seraphine. "I overrode it to save the lives of the students you trapped in that ravine. To save them from the optical poison you pumped in. To save them from a simulation you had turned into an execution chamber." "Lies!" a prefect shouted from the floor. "He is a janitor," another yelled. What would he know of protocols? Arden walked to the very center of the stage. He was no longer the invisible man. He was, in that moment, the absolute focus of 5,000 pairs of eyes. "That is a good question," Arden said, his voice gaining strength. "What would a janitor know about the Veritas Core? What would a low-rank human know about systems architecture, about harmonic frequency keys, or about algorithmic bias?" He turned, not to the crowd, but to the committee. "He would know." "Nothing," Arden said. "But I would—" He looked back at Draith. "My name is Arden Hale, and I am the co-lead architect and original designer of the Veritas Core system." The silence in the atrium was no longer a murmur. It was a black hole. It was the sound of 5,000 minds trying to process an impossibility. Draith's placid expression, finally, infinitesimally, cracked. His eyes narrowed. This was not part of the plan. "I was the architect of the core morality subroutines," Arden continued, his voice now ringing with an authority that had been hidden for years. "I designed the primary logic, the efficiency models, the very heart of this system. And I left. I left when my partner, and men like Headmaster Draith, decided to sell that heart to the highest bidder. When they ripped out the inefficient code. When they decided that the core's purpose was not to measure worth, but to enforce predictability." He pointed to Draith. "He turned a tool of insight into a weapon of control. He did it for you," he said to the committee. "He did it for the funding. He turned this academy into a factory, and the students into products, all to satisfy your demand for a flawless system." He took a deep, shuddering breath. The ghost was finally speaking. "And that system," he said, his voice dropping, becoming thick with a pain that was still raw. "That corrupted system, that efficient model. It is the reason my sister is dead. It reallocated her medical treatment slot to a student with a higher probability of societal contribution. It murdered a child, Headmaster, all for the sake of a clean data set." The atrium was a sea of stunned, horrified faces. "He is lying," Draith roared, his composure shattering. "He is insane. He is a disgruntled, failed employee sees him." "He is not lying." Seraphine Valcara stepped forward. She was not in her pinnacle uniform. She, too, was in her smoke-stained, torn simulation suit. She looked like a warrior. "I was there," she said, her voice clear and carrying. I was in that ravine. Headmaster Drath is correct that Arden Hale overrode the door. He did it to save my life. He did it to save the life of Naira Ilex. And he did it to save the life of freshman Caden, who Headmaster Drath had trapped in there with us. She walked to stand beside Arden. The image was undeniable, the pinnacle and the janitor, united. "And I have proof," Seraphine said. She looked at Astra, who was now standing with Tamsin's support. Astra Kell nodded, though she looked terrified. She raised her personal terminal and broadcast a file to the main screen. It was not a video. It was a data log, a horrifying, swirling graph of emotional energy. "This," Seraphine said, her voice filled with cold fury, "is the data Headmaster Drath was really collecting. He was not testing us. He was harvesting us. He was feeding our panic, our fear of death, directly into his secret predictive module. The insurgent he was fighting was me. He was trying to provoke a failure. He was trying to prove I was unfit to lead. All so he could demonstrate his new thought-policing toy to the committee. This is an outrage," Drath stammered, his wooden face now slick with a faint, oily sweat. "This is fabricated data. It proves nothing." "Oh, I think it proves he is a liar," a third voice said. Naira Ilex stepped forward, her golden, reptilian eyes fixed on the headmaster. She held up her own terminal. "I, too, have a recording, but mine is not as philosophical as Pinnacle Kell's. Mine is just a log file." Drath froze. He recognized the file format on her screen. "You see," Naira said, her voice a low, sarcastic purr. "I have always been loyal to the system. I believe in the core. I believe in its logic, which is why, when I saw my own leader, Seraphine, deviating from protocol, I did my duty. I sent this exact footage to Headmaster Drath." She was, Arden realized, the one who had sent the pictures from the oral dynamics wing. "I sent him proof of my loyalty," Naira continued, "and he rewarded me. He gave me access to his private, administrative data channel, so I could monitor the situation. He thought I was his political ally, his creature." She looked at Drath, her thin lips curling into a smile that was all teeth. But a good tactician always verifies her data. She broadcast her file. The screen split. On one side, the biosphere. On the other, a user log. "This," Naira said, "is a log of the headmaster's own terminal, time-stamped to the simulation. Please, observe." The atrium watched, in horrified silence. As the log file scrolled, they saw User A, Drath, Command Initiatum Surge. They saw User A, Drath, Command Override, Safety Protocol Fog. They saw User A, Drath, Command Lockdown, Sector 4-Door Omega. "He did not just let it happen," Naira said, her voice echoing in the dead silence. "He did it. He set the trap. He deployed the poison. He locked the door. He tried to murder us. All for a good quarterly review." The committee was on its feet. The lead auditor's face was white. "Headmaster Drath, this is—" "A test," Drath shrieked, his facade of calm completely gone, revealing the writhing, desperate creature beneath. "It was a test of loyalty, a test of strength. This academy is not for the weak. It is not for the sentimental." He slammed his fist on the podium, his own administrative access flaring to life. "You want to see the system. You want to see my system. I will show you." He engaged the discipline index. At maximum, campus-wide, power. "You," he snarled at Naira. "Who betrayed me?" Penalty. Naira's terminal flashed crimson. Her rank, number 3, instantly plummeted past 1,000. "You," he spat at Tamsin, Who consorted with him? Penalty Tamsin's rank vanished from the board. You, he whispered at Astra. Who blocked me? Penalty Astra's rank evaporated. You, he roared at Seraphine. Who stood by him? Penalty Seraphine's rank. Pinnacle 1. The name that had been at the top for 3 years crashed. It fell past 100, past 1,000, past 5,000. She was, in an instant, in the lowest percentile of the entire academy. The atrium was in chaos. Students were screaming. The entire ranking system was in freefall. Thousands of students, everyone who had looked at Arden, spoken to him, even been near him, were being decimated, their futures erased in a single, vindictive keystroke. You see, Draith screamed, triumphant, a mad light in his eyes. That is order, that is control. You stand against the system. You are erased. No, Arden said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the din. He was standing at the podium Draith had abandoned, his own hands moving over the controls. He was not fighting Draith's commands. He was adding a new one. This is not a system, Draith. This is a dictatorship. And the thing about a good system is that it always has a back door. What are you doing? Draith hissed. I am pulling the final snack card, Arden said. He looked up at the main screen, which was a sea of red penalties. You see, Headmaster, when I first built the core, I knew it could be corrupted. I knew men like you would try to use it for this. He gestured to the chaos. So I built in a failsafe, a hard-coded foundational logic bomb, a way for the inefficient to be heard. You were so busy purging my empathy credit. You never thought to look for the hardware that delivered it. He looked at the crowd. My microsensors, the ones on the snack cart, the ones on the tables, the ones you all thought were just dust. Draith's face went white. No. Oh, yes, Arden said. They were not just on my cart. For the last 48 hours, they have been on every refectory tray, on every library desk, on every dormitory door. I have not been hacking your system. I have been feeding it. I have been collecting a second, hidden, parallel set of data. I have been watching. He hit the final command. Execute recalibration empathy, credit campus, wide. The board stopped flashing red. For one long second, it went blank, and then it turned green. A new wave of data hit the system. It was not a cascade. It was a tsunami. A student in the lowest percentile, a girl who had shared her meager lunch ration with a friend, suddenly gained 1,000 points. A boy who had spent an hour tutoring a failing classmate for free shot up into the top 500. Jack Somandi, still in the med bay, was suddenly in the top 100. His repair of the dorm filter reclassified as community support action. All over the atrium, terminals were lighting up. Students who had been kind. Students who had helped. Students who had shared. All of them. The invisible, the low rank, the inefficient, were rising. And the students who had hoarded, who had pushed, who had ignored, they were dropping. It was a revolution. A full, systemic reordering of the academy, based not on performance, but on goodness. No, Draith shrieked. He lunged for the console, shoving Arden aside. You will not. I am in control. I have the predictive model. That is what matters. I will show the committee, I will show them true power. He activated his final program, his ace in the hole, the loyalty predictor. He tried to force the system to purge Arden's new code, to reassert his own control. But he was too late. Arden was no longer at the podium. He was standing with Astra. He had his terminal connected to hers. Now, Astra, he said, the frequency key. Give it to me. He is trying to force a purge, Astra whispered, her eyes closed, her hands on his terminal. He is... he is trying to find all the dissenters. Then, let's give him something else to find, Arden said. Not a block, this time. A harmony. Our harmony. The empathy hymn. Push it. Push it right into the core of his predictive model. Astra took a deep breath. She did not sing. She became the frequency. Arden, using the acoustic key he had taken, opened the door to Draith's program, and Astra, with all her strength, flooded it. She did not just flood it with noise. She flooded it with the data she had been collecting her entire life. The sound of kindness, the frequency of altruism, the harmonic signature of compassion. On the main screen, Draith's predictive model flared to life, and then it changed. It was not just predicting loyalty, it was redefining it. It was absorbing the empathy credit. It was being forced, by its own logic, to accept the new data, to integrate the hymn as a foundational variable. The system was not just re-ranking, it was learning. It was, as Arden had said, being fixed. Draith stared at the screen, at the flowing green data, at his own predictive model, now hopelessly, beautifully corrupted with morality. He looked at the committee, their faces a mixture of awe and fury. He looked at the thousands of students, who were no longer screaming in fear, but cheering. He had not just lost. He had been redefined. He collapsed, his hands sliding off the console, a broken man. Arden stood, panting, his connection to Astra's terminal severed. He looked at the board. His own name was not on it. He had no rank. He was, as he had always been, outside the system. He looked across the stage. Seraphine was looking at him. Her rank was gone. Her title was gone. Everything she had ever worked for had been publicly stripped away. She looked relieved. She looked proud. She walked across the stage, ignoring the security, ignoring the committee, ignoring the roar of the crowd. She walked straight to him. He looked at her, and the ghost of his sister was, for the first time, quiet. She stopped in front of him. Her lavender eyes were clear, and they were shining. In front of the committee, in front of the entire academy, in the wreckage of the old system and the dawn of the new one. Seraphine Valcara reached out and took Ardenhale's hand. It was not a gesture of romance. Not yet. It was a gesture of solidarity. It was a political act. It was a promise. I stand with the redefinition of justice, she said, her voice quiet. But he heard her. He looked down at her hand, so strong and certain in his. He squeezed it. Me too, he said. Me too. The silence that followed the fall of Alaric Draith was heavier than the chaos that had preceded it. It was a vacuum, a sudden, terrifying absence of authority. The thousands of students in the atrium just stood, their terminals glowing with the new, chaotic, green data, and looked at the stage. They looked at the shattered headmaster being quietly, firmly escorted away by Academy security. They looked at the Orion Funding Committee, who were clustered in a tight, furious knot, speaking in low, rapid voices. And they looked at Arden and Seraphine, their hands still linked. The lead auditor, a tall, unamused woman with skin like polished granite, finally separated from her group. She strode to the podium, her presence silencing the rising murmur. The Ecliptica Academy is hereby, she announced, her voice like a gavel, placed under probationary review by the Orion conglomerate. Headmaster Draith is suspended, effective immediately, pending a full inquiry. She looked at the sea of students. The integrity of this institution has been compromised. The events of today have revealed both a catastrophic failure of oversight and an unexpected systemic resilience. Her eyes found Arden. The Veritas Core, it seems, is not the flawless machine we were sold. It is, apparently, a work in progress. We will be conducting a full audit of its source code, its secret subroutines, and its architect. She did not say his name. She did not have to. The crowd did not cheer. They were too stunned. The god machine that had ruled their lives was broken. Or perhaps it had just been born. The days that followed were a quiet, structured chaos. The committee, in an act of profound, pragmatic damage control, did not shut the academy down. They did the opposite. They sanctioned the change. The Veritas core was not taken offline. It was updated, formally. The empathy credit was permanently integrated into the core code, but it was not alone. Within a week, a new, student-led council which, to Naira's tactical satisfaction, she was convinced to help organize pushed for another metric. The Interspecies Collaboration Index. It did not just reward individual kindness. It rewarded the bridging of gaps. It rewarded Hyrastians tutoring Xylothians. It rewarded Valkyrans sharing lab time with Xandarians. The old privileges did not vanish overnight, but they became conditional. The priority elevators still existed, but they now responded to a hybrid score: your academic rank, plus your community service hours. The Pinnacle dining room was reopened, but it was now a collaborative study lounge, and its executive food rations were available to any team that met its interspecies project goals. The system was still a system, but its currency had changed. The former Pinnacles felt the shift most acutely. They were no longer queens. Their ranks, reset after Draith's purge, were high. Their actions in the biosphere had ensured that, but they were no longer unassailable. They had, for the first time in their lives, peers. It was, for Nira Ilex, deeply annoying. She found Seraphine in the archives, the place where they had, only a week ago, begun to see the cracks. Nira did not knock. She simply appeared. "You are a terrible influence," Nira said, her voice a dry rasp. Seraphine looked up from a data slate, a small smile touching her lips. "Nira, a pleasure, as always." "I am now spending," Nira continued, leaning against a data stack, 3 hours a day. 3. Arguing with a council of freshmen about the equitable distribution of library bandwidth. They are appallingly sentimental, and they keep talking about their feelings. "A fate worse than death? I am sure," Seraphine said. Nira's golden, reptilian eyes narrowed. She was silent for a long moment. "I was wrong," she said, the words sounding like pulling teeth. Seraphine waited. "My analysis of your deviation was incorrect," Nira clarified, as if discussing a failed lab experiment. "I calculated that your sentimental attachment to the humans' logic was a tactical liability. It was, in fact, a statistically improbable, high-risk, high-reward strategic maneuver. It was appallingly effective. I underestimated you, and him." "And yourself, Nira," Seraphine said, her voice gentle. "I did what was tactically necessary," Nira snapped, defensively. "You saved Caden's life. You lied to us about it. You used efficiency as an excuse for an act of pure compassion. You, Nira Elix, you have an empathy credit." Nira looked, for a second, genuinely horrified. Then, a slow, thin smile spread across her face. "This transparency you are all championing. It is messy. I do not like it." "Good," Seraphine smiled, holding out a data slate. "Then you will hate this. It is the first charter for the new Student Oversight Council. It requires a lot of signatures and a lot of meetings." Nira took the slate, her eyes scanning the text. "This is a nightmare. It is full of Consensus building. She shuddered. I will sign it. On one condition. What is that? We add a clause about the strict limitation of interpretive dance as a form of protest. I saw a group of Signians doing it in the atrium. It was inefficient. Seraphine laughed. It was a real, unrestrained sound. I think that can be arranged. Tamsin Core, on the other hand, was in paradise. The fall of the old system had been, for her, a liberation. She had taken over a disused mechanics bay in the sublevels, the same one where she had ambushed Arden. She had, with her own 2 hands, hung a sign. It read, "The Workshop." It was, within days, the most popular place on campus. It was chaotic, loud, and smelled of ozone, hot metal, and baked goods. Tamsin, her hand now healed, save for a faint, crimson scar, was teaching a group of terrified-looking xenobiology students how to rewire a faulty protein synthesizer. No, 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 she bellowed, snatching a power coupling from one of them. You are trying to ask it to work. You have to tell it. Show it who is boss. Like this. She slammed the coupling into place, and the machine whirred to life. See physics. It is just applied stubbornness. Her bay was filled with students. Students who needed their data slates fixed, their dorm filters cleaned, their kinetic gloves recalibrated. She was the queen of the broken, the high priestess of the purely functional. On her workbench, next to a disassembled propulsion unit, was a large, clear jar. It was half full of foil-wrapped snack bars. A sign was taped to it, scrawled in her heavy, blocky script, payment. 1. One high-protein, snack bar human approved, or 1 sincere compliment on my superior technique. Your choice. Calories preferred. She had decided, the happiest she had ever been. Arden, however, was not happy. He was adrift. He was no longer a janitor. He was no longer a ghost. The committee had, in a move of profound legal jujitsu, given him a full, retroactive pardon, reinstated his title as architect, and then put him on mandatory paid leave. He had a new, spacious apartment in the faculty spire. He had unlimited access to the archives. He had, for the first time in years, silence, and he did not know what to do with it. He found himself walking. He took the old service corridors, not because he had to, but because he was used to them. He walked past the kitchens, the engineering bays, the data closets, and, one afternoon, his feet, moving of their own accord, took him to the one place he had avoided, the Academy's affiliated medical station. It was on a lower level, connected by a long, sterile, white glass corridor. He had not walked this corridor since the day he had carried Maya out, her body light, her hand cold. He stopped outside the room. The number was still the same, 408C. It was empty, the door slightly ajar, the light on inside. It was being sterilized for the next patient. He pushed the door open. It was just a room. White walls, a biobed, a monitor, currently dark. It was sterile, anonymous, empty. It held none of her. There was no trace of her laughter, her frustration with the medical tutors, her love of the cheap, shimmering gummy snacks he would sneak to her. It was just a room where a statistical error had been made, a room where a life had been rounded down. His anger, the cold fire that had fueled him for so long, was gone. It had burned out in the atrium, leaving this, a cold, empty, hollow space, just like the room. He did not know how long he stood there. He just stood, the ghost, at his own grave. I wondered if I would find you here. He did not turn. He did not need to. Seraphine's voice was soft, hesitant. She did not enter the room. She stood in the doorway. "They are cleaning it," he said, his voice a dead monotone. "I thought it would— I do not know what I thought. That it would feel smaller," she said, her voice quiet. "That is how I felt when I went back to my old Pinnacle quarters. All that space. It just felt empty." He finally turned to look at her. She was in a simple, gray academic uniform, no braid of rank. Her silver-white hair was unbound, falling over her shoulders. She looked younger and tired. "She liked shiny things," Arden said, the words coming out before he could stop them. He reached into his pocket. His hand, when it came out, was trembling. She always said the medical gowns were boring. She wanted flair." He opened his hand. On his palm sat a small, coiled object. It was a child's bracelet, made of interlocking, metallic, rainbow-colored gummies, a cheap, synthesized snack. "I found it when I was packing. It was in one of my old jacket pockets. I used to buy them for her. After—" He swallowed. "I could not throw it away." Seraphine looked at the bracelet, a small, bright, childish thing in the palm of this man who had toppled a government. She looked at his face, at the pain that was so raw, so open. She stepped into the room. She did not say, "I am sorry." She did not say, "It will be okay." She did not say any of the meaningless, empty things people say in the face of such a loss. She simply walked to him, and gently, she took the bracelet from his hand. She walked to the biobed. It was, she knew, a symbolic, perhaps sentimental act. Naira would have called it inefficient. She placed the bright, metallic loop of candy on the sterile, white pillow. A tiny offering, a child's treasure, left in a tomb. Arden watched her. He had not been able to do it. His hands had been too heavy. He let out a breath. It was a ragged, shuddering sound, the first real breath he had taken in years. It was the sound of the ghost, finally, letting go. Seraphine stood beside him, and they looked at the small, bright object, a memorial made of a snack. "It was not your fault, Arden," she said, her voice so low it was almost a thought. "I know," he whispered, "but I needed to make it right." "You did," she said. She put her hand, not on his shoulder, but on his forearm. A simple, human touch. "You did." They stood in the silence, together, until the light in the corridor began to fade. 2 days later, the committee summoned him. "You are Mr. Hale," the lead auditor said, her voice betraying no emotion. "A significant problem." Arden, dressed for the first time in a non-janitorial, non-sabotage outfit, just waited. "You are, by law, the intellectual property co-owner of the Veritas Corps. You are, by popular student acclaim, a hero. And you are, by your own admission, a deeply conflicted and compromised individual who just cost this academy over 200 million credits in property damage and lost confidence." "I will pay for the door," Arden said. The auditor did not smile. "We have a vacuum. Architect, Draith is gone. The system is recalibrating. It is stable, but it is volatile. It needs a guardian, a temporary protector, someone who understands its heart, to guide it as it relearns." "No," Arden said, instantly. "The student council has nominated you," the auditor continued, as if he had not spoken. "Unanimously, even Nira Elex," she said, and I quote, "He is the only one sentimental enough to be trusted, and the only one smart enough to not be stupid about it." We are inclined to agree. No, Arden said again, louder. He stood up. You cannot. You do not understand. You put me in that chair. You give me that power. And I will become him. I will become Draith. I cannot. I will not. The fear in his voice was real. It was a raw, visceral panic. The auditor looked at him, her expression unreadable. The position is temporary, an interim of 6 months, until a new headmaster can be vetted. The offer is not negotiable. We believe you are the only human solution. Arden walked out of her office. He did not run. He walked, very fast, to the one place he might be understood. He found Seraphine in the atrium, teaching a free-form class on interspecies diplomatic theory to a mixed group of over 50 students. She was in her element. She was a natural leader, not of rank, but of ideas. He waited, pacing at the back, until she was finished. She saw him, dismissed the class, and walked over, a look of concern on her face. Arden, what is it you look like you just saw? Well, you look like you did 2 weeks ago. They want me to be him, he said, his voice tight. They want me to be the interim headmaster, to be the guardian of the core. Seraphine was silent for a moment. That makes a certain amount of sense. Sense, he almost shouted, and a few lingering students turned to look. It is a trap. It is a test. Do not you see? The chair is still a chair. Seraphine, the throne is still a throne. You put me in it, and I have all this anger. I will break it. I will break them. I cannot be trusted with it. Good, she said, her voice calm. He stared at her. Good, I just told you I am unstable. I am a risk. You are, she agreed, stepping closer. And that is why you are the only one who can do it. That does not make any sense. Power, Seraphine said, her voice low and fierce, is only fearsome when it is in the hands of someone who is not afraid of it. Draith was not afraid of it. He craved it, and it consumed him. You are terrified of it. You are terrified of yourself. And that, Arden Hale, that is why you can be trusted. She put her hand on his chest. She could feel his heart hammering. You are not afraid of the power, Arden. You are afraid of being responsible for it. And that is what responsibility is. It is being scared to death of making the wrong choice, and making one anyway, because you have to. He looked at her, his panic warring with the absolute, clear-eyed faith in her face. I will not. I cannot do it alone, he whispered. No one asked you to, she said. The student council will be advising. Naira will be auditing. Tamsin will be maintaining. And I will be here to remind you. He let out a long, ragged breath. They said 6 months. Then you have 6 months, she said, to design a system that does not need a single guardian. You, more than anyone, know how to build a good failsafe. He nodded, a slow, dawning realization on his face. He was not being asked to be a king. He was being asked to be an architect of limits. I will need recall mechanisms, he muttered, already thinking. And a fully transparent oversight charter, and term limits, real ones. Go tell them, Seraphine said, a small, proud smile on her face. He took her hand, just for a second. Thank you. Do not thank me, she said. I just volunteered for a lot of very boring meetings. The academy, that night, felt different. It was loud. For the first time, it was loud. The student council had organized an impromptu, campus-wide festival of recalibration. It was, in effect, a massive, interspecies potluck held in the main atrium. The air smelled, not of sterile filters, but of 1,000 different things. There was the sharp, mineral scent of Tamsin's Hyrastian grilled fruits. There was the aroma of roasted calla nuts. There was something that smelled suspiciously like Arden's spice cakes. And there was music. Astra Kell was at the center of it. She was not on a stage. She was just there, on the floor, with a group of other musicians. She was not just playing. She was harmonizing. Her empathy hymn was no longer a silent broadcast. It was a song, a complex, gentle, flowing piece of music that seemed to find the resonant frequency of the room and make it warmer. Arden stood at the edge of it all, a cup of some unidentifiable, bubbling, purple liquid in his hand. He was, for the first time in his life, utterly out of his depth. "You look lost," Seraphine said, appearing at his side. She was holding a skewer of the Hyrastian grilled fruit. "I am," he admitted. I do not. Festival." "Neither do I," she said, taking a bite. "It is sticky. But Tamsin seems to be enjoying my compliments, so my rank is high." He laughed, a small, genuine laugh. The music shifted. It became slower, rhythmic. Astra was weaving an old, earth-human melody into the Cygnian harmonies. It was a waltz. "Oh, no," Arden said, his blood running cold. I do not dance." "A weakness," Seraphine noted, her eyes twinkling. "We will have to create a metric for it. Kinesthetic social aptitude." "I will fail," Arden said, miserably. "So will I," she said, and she put her fruit skewer down and held out her hand. "Which is why we should probably fail together. For collaboration points." He looked at her hand, the hand that had held his on the stage, the hand that had placed his sister's memorial. He sighed, a deep, long-suffering sound, and put his purple drink down. "This is going to be a disaster." "Almost certainly," she agreed. He took her hand. They walked into the middle of the crowd. He put his hand on her waist. She put hers on his shoulder. It was awkward. He was a janitor architect. She was a diplomat warrior. Neither of them had ever been taught this. They started to move. It was not a waltz. It was a shuffle. "You are stepping on my foot," Seraphine observed, her voice strained. "I am aware," Arden panted. "I am trying to recalibrate. Your wafer per second ratio is acceptable," she said, trying not to laugh. "But your rhythmic integrity is low." He looked down at her, and she looked up at him. They were terrible at this. They were clumsy. They were surrounded by 1,000 aliens. Their clothes were rumpled. The music was strange, and the future was a terrifying, unwritten page. And neither of them had ever been happier. Arden smiled. It was not a ghost smile. It was not a janitor's smile. It was his. "Well," he said, pulling her just a fraction closer. "We have 6 months. We will just practice." A new season had begun at Ecliptica. The change was not in the curriculum, but in the air and in the pathways. The hard light barriers that had once enforced rank-based priority on the walkways were gone. The elevated, climate-controlled paths were now open to all, though an unwritten courtesy, a new social code, had emerged. A faster pace was kept for those clearly heading to a lab, a slower one for those in discussion. The great library, once a fortress of privilege, was now open 24 hours a day. Its prime resource slots were no longer allocated by rank, but by a new, dynamic quota system managed by the Student Council. If you wanted access to the synaptic uplinks, you signed up for a block, and in return, you paid for your time by volunteering 1 hour to digitize old texts for the lower access archives. The system was no longer about hoarding. It was about circulating. In the grand atrium, the great flags of the conglomerate world still hung, but they were no longer arranged by contribution quotas or political power. They were arranged, at Astra's suggestion, by their spectral harmony. It was a small, symbolic change that made the entire hall feel, somehow, more balanced. Arden Hale, in his new, terrifyingly bland office as interim guardian of the Corps, addressed the Academy for the first time. He did not stand at the grand podium. He broadcast from his desk, his image appearing on every terminal. He looked, as Naira had pointedly remarked, appallingly unofficial. "I am not a headmaster," he began, his voice lacking all of Draith's smooth artifice. "I am just an architect, and we have a lot of repairs to make." He brought up a new document. It was not a set of rules. It was a menu. "We are calling this the Snack Charter," he said, and Seraphine, watching from her new, much smaller student council office, groaned and put her head in her hands. He is really calling it that." "It is a charter," Arden continued, "based on a simple premise: a community that does not feed itself fails. The system, the core, it has learned to measure performance. Now, it must learn to measure nurturance. From now on, 1/4 of every student's ranking assessment will be tied to a mandatory act of resource sharing." He explained, it was not just about food. Sharing could mean sharing lab time. It could mean sharing your notes. It could mean spending an hour in Tamsin's workshop, repairing filtration units for the lower-level dorms. "The snack," Arden concluded, a small, almost shy smile on his face, "is just a symbol. The act of caring is the metric. Any act that feeds, supports, or shelters another member of this community. That is now what the Veritas Corps values most. That is all. Class dismissed." "I guess." His image vanished. Seraphine's terminal chimed. It was a message from Naira. "He is a sentimental fool, and I am incorporating his snack charter into the new ethical bylaws. Stop him from naming anything else. Ever." Seraphine, who had just been overwhelmingly, democratically elected president of the Interspecies Student Council, smiled. She and Arden had an understanding. It was a quiet one. They did not hide their relationship, but they did not flaunt it. They were, in the new ecliptica, defined by their jobs. She was the voice of the students. He was the temporary, and very reluctant, voice of the machine. They met, professionally, in committee meetings. They met, privately, on the glass-roofed observation deck, long after the rest of the academy was asleep. It was a new, delicate balance. The ripples of their revolution spread. Jack Somandi, his record fully cleared, had been appointed the very first student administrator for community resources in his dormitory. He had, with Tamsin's gleeful help, rewired the entire lower-level filtration system, bypassing the old, inefficient central controls and giving each dorm block autonomy. He was, suddenly, one of the most popular and powerful students on campus. Astra Kell, in a move that shocked the academic world, had taken her empathy hymn protocol and released it, open source, to the entire conglomerate. The frequency was now in the wild. a piece of code that could not be put back in its box. Tamsin and Nira, in the most unlikely partnership the Academy had ever seen, had seized on it. They were collaborating. Nira, providing the ruthless, logical framework. Tamsin the blunt, functional engineering to build an ethical kit. It was a set of hardware and software protocols, based on Astra's hymn, that could be adapted to any school or corporate system, acting as a moral governor to detect and flag algorithmic bias. It was, Tamsin had bragged, a snack, but for data. The biggest change, however, was invisible. It happened not in a meeting, but in a secure, sealed archive. The Orion Funding Committee, in the course of their audit, had unsealed the original, foundational code of the Veritas Core, the logs from its inception over a decade ago, and in doing so, they had found the truth. Arden was in his office, staring at the file they had just sent him, when Seraphine walked in. She did not knock. As student council president, she had access. "You look," she said, "like you just saw a ghost." He turned his screen so she could see it. It was a page of code. Pure, elegant, complex code. It was a subroutine. And its title, written by a younger, more idealistic man, was Core Subroutine Empathy Credit. It is the same," she whispered, comparing it to the code he had hacked into the system. "It is the original," Arden said, his voice hollow. He scrolled down. I wrote this 10 years ago. Before everything. It was the heart of the system. It was the whole point. It was supposed to measure not just what you did, but how you helped." He scrolled further, to a different log, a deletion query, an administrative override, subroutine, empathy, credit, deleted. Reason statistical noise, metric incompatible with funding partner priorities. The deletion was authorized by 2 signatures, his former partner and headmaster Alaric Draith. They cut it out," Arden said, his mind reeling. "Before it ever went online, they told me it was buggy, that it was inefficient. They lied." He looked at his hands. "All these years, I thought I was getting revenge. I thought I was destroying his creation." He looked at her, his eyes wide with a dawning, shattering realization. "I was not. Was I? I was not. Hacking the system. I was not breaking it." "No," Seraphine said, a profound, gentle awe in her voice. "You were not. You were just remembering. You were just fixing it. You were not destroying it. Arden. You were finishing it. You were giving it back its heart." He stared at the code, the ghost of his younger, hopeful self. He had not been a saboteur. He had been a restorer. The entire, long, dark path of his grief. It had just been a way back to the beginning. He let out a long, slow breath. And for the first time since Maya's death, the weight of his rage was truly, finally, gone. "You knew," he said, turning to her, a new, lighter thought striking him. You helped. You were my first convert." "I was," she admitted, a small, private smile playing on her lips. "Although I may have had a slight, informational advantage." "What do you mean?" he asked. "The snack," she said, as if it were obvious. "On convocation day, the first day, the salt wafer," he said, remembering their confrontation. I was cruel. I used my research against you." "You did," she agreed. "It was very effective, but..." She leaned against his desk, her silver hair catching the light. I had already eaten one. Before the confrontation. Before the ranks even started to fall. Arden stared at her. What but? I did not see you. The cameras in that sector. They were the ones Drath lost. The footage was corrupted. It was, Seraphine said, her smile widening. Because I was the one who corrupted it. Or rather, my rank did. I was Pinnacle 1. My personal security detail automatically blurs any low-level, non-scheduled recordings of me. A privacy perk. You ate one, he said, dumbfounded. I did, she said. I was walking past. I smelled home. It was not just a salt wafer. Arden. It was a Valkaran salt wafer, made with 10 trace minerals. The kind you can only get if you have... read. If you have done. As you said. Research. It was not an attack. It was not a hack. She reached out, her fingers tracing the glowing text of his empathy credit on the screen. It was, from the very first moment, an act of compassion, a snack, offered to someone who, you knew, was probably starving for a taste of home. He looked at her, truly seeing the depth of her for the first time. She had known, from the very beginning, that he was not what he seemed, and she had played along. You knew I was more than a janitor, he said. I knew, she said, that you were more than a hack. I knew that whoever had bothered to learn the specific mineral balance of my people was not just bored. So, all that, the confrontation, the anger. Oh, that was real, she assured him. You were, and still are, deeply annoying, but I was on your side, Arden, before I even knew. There was a side. That night, they were on the roof, the great glass observation dome, the highest point of the academy, was their place. The chaos of the day, the meetings, the committees, the charter writing was a kilometer below them. Up here, there was only the cold, silent vacuum in the stars. A meteor shower, a slow, majestic rain of light, was streaking across the Orion Nebula. They sat on a maintenance ledge, their shoulders touching, sharing a single, foil-wrapped something. It was one of Tamsin's experiments. It tasted like grilled fruit, motor oil, and hope. You know, Seraphine said, her voice quiet, it is strange. For my entire life, I was Pinnacle 1. I was the perfect product. I knew exactly who I was. She looked out at the falling stars. Now, I do not have a rank. I am just Seraphine, and I have no idea what I am doing. You are leading, Arden said, taking a bite of the oily fruit. You are building. That is harder than just being the best. She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at him. You did not break the rankings, Arden, she said, her voice soft. You taught them how to love. He looked at her impossible, earnest, lavender-eyed sincerity. He felt that old, familiar, sarcastic wit rise up, the ghost's defense mechanism, but it died on his lips. She was not being poetic. She was being precise. He looked down at the academy, glowing below them. He thought of the new, green light of the core. You did not lose your throne, Seraphine, he replied, his voice just as quiet. You just redefined what it means to lead. He took her hand. It was not awkward. Not anymore. Far below them, in the new 24-hour library, a different kind of light was glowing. a Xandarian student. His shift over, passed a steaming cup of synthesized hot calf to a Hyrastian, who was just starting her study session. "Good luck," the Xandarian said. "Thanks," the Hyrastian replied, taking the cup. "You too." It was a small, quiet, human moment. And, in the heart of the great machine, in the very core of the academy, a new line of data was logged, a soft, green light, a tiny, almost imperceptible rise in the score. Empathy credit, recorded. The number god was dead. The rankings, it turned out, were just a story. And for the first time, in the cold, vast darkness of space, it was a story about people.